Hello everyone. In this session, we want to take a look at distributed file system fault tolerance. When we talk about fault tolerance as it relates to DFS namespace, we mean that we are putting steps in place to ensure that the failure of either a domain controller or a server hosting a DFS namespace root will not create problems if the namespace became unavailable. In other words, we want to have a backup. If that namespace server goes down, we still want our users to be able to access their shared folders. Now, there are two kinds of fault tolerance available for DFS namespaces. The first type of fault tolerance would entail setting up multiple root targets for domain-based DFS namespace. And the second kind of fault tolerance would involve setting up a standalone DFS namespace system using a failover cluster. Let us first examine the multiple root target scenario. Here on our left, we have DC1, and on DC1, we have DFS namespace and replication installed. Once we install the DFS namespace, and we create a namespace on the server, we will see that there is a DFS root. And within that DFS root is where the namespace will be saved. Once we have our namespace, we can create the folder target on the namespace, and then we will then proceed to add the links to the shared folders on other servers on the network. The second server, DC2, also needs to have that DFS root. What if that first server were unavailable? Then users will not be able to access their shared data. So that is why we need DC2, which also needs to have that DFS root. When we are creating DFS namespace root targets for domain-based DFS namespaces, we need a minimum of at least 2 domain controllers and 2 DFS namespace root targets within the domain that is hosting the root. So we need then to have the DFS root, the namespace, the folder targets over on DC2. Once we have the folder target on DC2, then we can right click on that folder target and connect it to the shared folders so that we also have those target links on DC2. So these two DCs here, they can also be part of a failover cluster. And if we make them part of a failover cluster, we just have to make sure that each DC has its own storage. We don't want shared storage. We want each DC to have its own storage. We can also create DFS namespace roots on non-clustered servers. So your server doesn't have to be clustered. You can have a non-clustered server and it will provide the same level of fault tolerance. We now want to turn our attention to the standalone DFS namespace fault fault-tolerant server. To make sure that the standalone DFS root is fault-tolerant, what we do is to create the root on the shared cluster storage of a clustered file server by using the cluster administrator console. So the first server will be the cluster server, and then we will add server 2 and server 3 to that cluster. The root of the DFS, we're going to create that on the cluster storage of the file server. And again, like I said, we're going to do that by using the cluster administrator console. If there is a failure on any of the nodes in the cluster, then DFS will continue to be fully available as long as a single node of the cluster is available. Remember that the standalone DFS namespace is not dependent on our Active Directory. So you don't have to have a domain controller with the standalone DFS namespace. If the cluster that hosts the standalone DFS namespace is available, then that DFS namespace is also available. So we have two types of fault tolerance, the domain-based and the standalone namespace. And that's how we will provide fault tolerance for a DFS namespace. This is the end of our session on DFS fault tolerance, and I want to thank you for listening. Let us take a look at the structure of the DFS root. We have DFS namespace and DFS replication installed on the server. And before we create the namespace, we're going to look at our local drive. We're going to take a look. So we're going to double click on our File Explorer icon, and we're going to double click on our local C drive. And we can see here that there is no DFS root. Now we're going to close the Explorer window. We're going to click on Tools, DFS Management, and we're going to create a namespace. So we're going to right click and click on New Namespace. We're going to browse for the server that will host the namespace. Advanced, Find Now. We're going to choose London DC1 to host this namespace. Say OK and OK a second time. We click on Next to continue. And now we need to enter a name for the namespace. And we can see here that it says this name will appear after the server or domain name in the namespace path. So you will have the server, the name, or domain name. So let's see. We're going to click in the box for the name that we're going to put for our namespace. And we're going to type the namespace SALES data space namespace. SPACE. So that's the name that we're going to give to the namespace. sales data namespace, and we want to click on next to continue. We're going to be using a domain-based namespace, so we're going to click on next, and we need to click on create. So we see here for the namespace settings, we have the namespace name, we have the server coming before that namespace name, we have the namespace type, and we have the namespace server. And below that it says root shared folder. A shared folder will be created if one does not already exist. So we're going to click on create. And we can see that we have successfully created the namespace. So we need to close that namespace wizard box. We're now going to expand the namespace. And we're going to right click on that namespace. And we want to create the folder target. So we create new folder. And we want to type the name of the folder target using the keyboard. So we're going to click on the keyboard, click inside of the name box, and type the name that we're giving to this folder target. We're going to call it sales. Sales folder. Minimize the keyboard. And what we need to do now is to add the target. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add those shared folders so that we can have the target links on DC1. So we're going to click on add, and the shared folders are on server 1. So we have to browse for server 1. Let's look for it. London server 1. Okay, and there are 3 folders we want to bring over, or that we want to create the target link to rather. And so we're going to try sales info 1. Click on OK. OK a second time. We're going to add the second one. We have to browse for London server 1 again. And then we need to add that second shared folder link. So remember what we're doing. We are creating the links to the shared folder on our first server, DC1, because we want to go and look at the structure after we've completed this to see that the namespace and the target folder are really in that DFS root that we will need to also create on the second server. We're going for the third one. And again, we want London server 1. And here it is, sales info 3. So we can say OK twice here. And we want to close the new folder box. And we don't want to create a replication group right now, so we want to click on no. Now let's go look at the DFS root to see the structure. We're going to click on the File Explorer window. We're going to double click on the C drive. And here we do have DFS root, which was created when we created that namespace. So we want to click on the DFS root, open it, and you can see that we have the sales data namespace. Open that one, And you see that we have the folder. And this folder will contain the links to those shared folders on London server 1. We now need to make sure that we have a copy of the DFS root on DC2, and that is how we will provide fault tolerance for DC1. Again, so that if it happens that DC1 goes down and is not available, users will still be able to access the shared data from the other domain controller, DC2, which also has the DFS root.